Hello everyone, my name is Libert. I'm visiting Crimea from Australia. I teach linguistics in the University of Newcastle, which is a small city a little north of Sydney. And I came here for a couple purposes, both of which are linguistically related. I was sent by a project to record endangered languages. So I was in China recording some Kazakh and Kyrgyz there and a couple other languages. And now I came here to record Crimean Tatar. It may not be clear whether Crimean Tatar really counts as endangered, but one might say that one has to be careful or else it might be in trouble. So I recorded some samples of various dialects in Simferopol and in Sudak, and I talked with many people and had many interesting conversations. One of the topics that came up a lot was what should be done to ensure that Crimean Tatar survives. And there are lots of things one can do. I emphasize the role of children. The next generation has to be able to speak Crimean Tatar well so they can pass it on to their children and so on. It's a little distressing when I hear that only about 30% of people of Crimean Tatars speak their language. Different people have given me different figures, but that was one figure I was given. So we want to ensure that the next generation, the children, speak Tatar fluently as their first language. So I advised parents to speak to their children only in Tatar and to not understand them if they speak in Russian. And also education is very important. Ideally, a lot of education should be in Tatar, whatever the subject is, and of course there should be lessons in Tatar itself. Various other things I thought about were the role of signs. There seem to be very few signs in Crimean Tatar in Crimea, and it's important to have signs in the language, even if not that many people speak it, as a symbolic reminder to everyone, both Crimean Tatars and the majority population, that this language is here and exists, and also that it's a language suitable for public use. You want to give the message that Crimean Tatar is not spoken only at home. It's not just a language for at home, but it's a language for public use. It's suitable for public use. I also think the role of the media is very important. The amount of television broadcasting in Tatar should be expanded if possible, and as many magazines and books and other publications should be printed. I realize that a lot of this has to do with money. It takes money to do the things that I'm talking about, and I know that the situation of Ukraine is not great economically, and that gives the government an excuse to not spend money on helping Tatar but doing other things. And it might be true that the economy is not great, but we do have to set aside we have to set aside funds for helping the indigenous language. I also was thinking that it's important to get the majority population on side, and if possible to have them part of the effort to protect Crimean Tatar. There might be some prejudice against the language and the people, perhaps, and this is unfortunate, but I have been thinking that there were the same sorts of feelings in various other countries, including my two countries, Australia and America, towards their indigenous populations. But this has been changing, and I think the majority populations have been having a more positive attitude towards their indigenous languages. And, for example, in the United States, a lot of kids are really into Indians, or they were when I was a kid, even if they're not of American Indian heritage. And if you can sort of make it fun for kids to pretend that they were part of history and their ancestors were part of history, whether they're Crimean Tatar or not. If they weren't Crimean Tatar, their ancestors interacted with Tatar people. So I think the kids should know, and everybody should know, that whether they're Tatars or not, the Crimean Tatar is part of the identity of the entire country, the entire population, not just the people who are ethnically Crimean Tatar. So if we can somehow build that feeling up, among the majority population and make them realize that the Tatar identity is part of their national identity, and translate that into greater funding and greater willingness to help, then that could do a lot for the language. I think the Crimean Tatar language may well survive. I think there are some languages which clearly will not survive in the world, and this is very unfortunate, and we can still try to save them or at least record them, but for many languages, including some Turkic languages, it's too late. There are just too few speakers, and in particular, too few young speakers. I don't think Tatar is in that situation, but it's also not one of the languages whose survival is absolutely assured, like English or French or Spanish. There's no conceivable way that the English language is going to die out, for example. Maybe in 100 years it won't be the most widely spoken language in the world, but there will still be English speakers, even if English speakers don't do anything to protect the language. So Tatar, Crimean Tatar, falls between these two extremes. It's not definitely going to die, and it's not definitely going to survive. So what that means is that the Crimean Tatar people have their destiny in their own hands. If they don't do anything, then the language will probably die. If they work hard, then the language will probably survive. So it's in the hands of the Crimean Tatars and in the hands of the wider population of Ukraine, if they can be shown that it's in their interest to help the language survive, because it's part of their country. Another thing I was thinking about was the role of tourism. I was in Sudak for a while, which is not a particularly interesting town unless you want to sit on the beach, although there's a very nice castle, a very impressive castle. But tourism brings a lot of money into this country and into this region. Now, most of these tourists who are coming here now aren't really interested in the heritage. They're interested in swimming on the beach, which is fine. But ideally, if some sort of historical tourism can be built up, so people come here to see the historical sites, and I realize that exists already. I was in Bachsarai and saw some of the historical things there. But if that can be increased, and if a worldwide effort can be made, people go to Turkey, for example, because there's so many historical things from so many civilizations in Turkey. That's one main reason why people go to Turkey, and I think that's one of the main appeals of that country. Well, you have a lot of historical stuff here which people may not be aware of overseas, at least outside of the Soviet Union. So if you can market the tourism of the historical sites and the culture and show that this is a special place. Every place is special, you could say, but this place is special because of the indigenous population. And it's special for a sad reason also, because of the deportation that happened during Soviet times, and that was a terrible tragedy. But it's part of the identity of the place as well, and it's part of the history of the place as well. So there's a lot of history, both happy and sad. There are many stories to tell. Many people have stories to tell. Many buildings have interesting stories around them. And if these stories can somehow be used as an attraction to bring people here, just as the history of Turkey brings people to Turkey, and just as the history of France brings people to France, then that might help, because of course the economy is very important. And you need to have money to do the things that I've been suggesting. So if you can build up a tourism base, sort of more intellectual tourism base, people coming here to actually see the sites and learn about the history, then that might help the economy, which will help everything. It's not my place to tell people what to do. The future of the language and the culture is in the hands of the Crimean Tatar people, but I can just make some suggestions as an outsider. I've visited various countries and looked at various languages, and linguists in general are interested in endangered languages throughout the world. Other people from my project will be going to other places in the world, for example, various islands in the Pacific, to look at indigenous languages there. And we always have the same idea, that we want to document and record and help to preserve the language if we can. So I hope that Crimean Tatar survives, just as I hope that every other language survives. Thank you.